Being Known podcast with my friend, Dr. Curt Thompson.
And my friend, the most beautiful man in the world,
Dear gracious.
Pepper Sweeney. Dude.
We are here to discover and explore what it means to be truly known. Listen, Dr. Desire, you better back off. You better just back off with that.
Like, hey, look, it's hard for me to back off. Like, it's just so compelling. It's too compelling.
Yeah, it's all Captain Compelling. That's what they call me.
That's right. That's right. Pepper Compelling Sweeney.
Yes. Listen, welcome to season 7 of the Being Known podcast, and we are in a mini series here. We're doing this series on confessional communities because so many of you, our listeners, have asked about information on confessional communities. It seems to be a pretty hot topic within a lot of the discussion groups and that kind of thing. And so we thought this would be a good way to spend a little time with you all and give you some more information on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in today's episode, we also we want to just highlight that, like we will in all these episodes, we're going to highlight that there are some additional ways to get more information about these confessional communities. One being through the Center for Being Known, where we do some online training and develop confessional communities, and then a more intensive version of that when in our practice, New Story Behavioral Health, where we do in-person 2.5-day to 3-day intensives, and we'll have one of those that are going to be coming up in December. And so anyway, just to bear in mind that what we're doing here, this is not a substitute for more, rigorous training as far as it goes, but it is to give us a more grounded sense of what these things are about. Yeah,
I would say that, this is Confessional Community 101, and you're all going to want to go a little deeper. So for sure, head over to thecbk.org is one place. And Curt, what do you know offhand the website for your?
Yeah, well, it's New Story Behavioral Health with Curt Thompson, MD. I mean, I don't have the exact link.
Yeah, we'll put
name.
We will put the link in the show notes for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you'll be able to go there and get more information.
Yeah. But today we really want to focus on an element of this process of confessional community that we haven't had a lot of opportunity to focus that much attention on. We've talked about it in some respects, but it is this notion that the primary purpose of these communities is to form us, that they are formational communities. That it's important for us then to know that we are people who are continually being formed. We Westerners would we really don't pay that much attention to the fact that there are forces in the world that are forming us. I'd like to think that I'm master of my own universe, and I am primarily in charge of what is happening to me and what I'm thinking and feeling, and I am in charge of my formation. And as it turns out from the very beginning, it didn't start that way. In the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, 7th verse, God formed the man from the mud of the earth. So we realize that we, from the very beginning as human beings, somebody else is forming us. And then when we get into attachment processes, we reckon, baby comes into the world, and that little baby's mind, right? She comes into the world looking for someone looking for her, but in that process, she is going to be formed by those forces that are around her. And our listeners, we've all been formed, first and foremost, by the families that we come into the world to live in. And we first have a far more passive role, right? The family is your parents, your siblings are forming us. Dude, I remember I hear this story. I don't remember this because I was like 9 months old. And I'd be this is the story I would hear from my mother and my brothers would tell this story. I'm like taking a nap in my crib. And my brother Jim, who was 16 when I was born, my brother Jim his friends would be over at our house, like they were playing football or basketball or something. He'd say, hey guys, come into the house. This is the story that I was told later. Come into the house. And I'd be taking a nap, and I'd be laying on my back, and Jim would say, "Hey, watch this." And apparently, he would pinch my nose shut, and I would do one of these. And he would just do this. And he'd let my nose go, and then he'd pinch my nose shut. And apparently, I was quite the entertainer, for a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds.
I have a similar. So when I was born into my family, I have 4 older sisters.
Dude.
And, well, first of all, my feet didn't touch the ground probably for the first 3 years because they were just carrying me around. But here's the story that's similar to yours. When I was really young, I shared a room with 2 of my sisters, and I would go to bed before them. And unbeknownst to me, they would be hiding under my bed and wait till I'd go to sleep. And they would take a glove and put it on a coat hanger and dangle it above my face and touch my face with it. And I'd wake up and I would just see this hand that was detached from anything coming at me. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Oh, talk about trauma. Dude,
Trauma.
That's like 3 episodes right there.
Exactly.
So our listeners, these are the people who are forming us. Okay? This is what's forming us, right? Gosh, with siblings like this.
Exactly.
Oh goodness. So developmentally, we first are pretty passive participants in all this. It's not like you're not asking for that glove of terror in the middle of the night. No. As we age, we become increasingly active in this formational process. I have greater and greater agency. And that agency is accompanied by choices. I'm then being given choices to make. And we see early in the game in Genesis, right? There's a choice between 2 trees. You've got this nascent human couple. And God says you have basically eat anything that you want, but then there's one choice.
Hang on a second. I'm Googling nascent because I'm
Oh my God.
just give me a second. I want to keep up.
They're young.
Let's see.
They're young. They're early. Okay. They're early in their development.
Thank you.
Young and early in your development is I can come up with one word to say all that. That's all I need. Okay. Oh my gosh. We're trying to do this in 20 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to be quiet for a minute. Go ahead.
No, don't lie to me like that. Okay. Okay, so this is the thing. They have choices to make, right? It's the choice between the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. It's simple, but it's difficult. And so there's that choice that is set before us, and it's set by other people. God set that choice before them. I'd like to think that I'm in charge of even the choices that I have to make. I decide which choices I'm even going to consider. But that's not the way it works, right? Your mom says you can have juice in the yellow cup or the blue cup, but you can't have soda. That's the I'm like, I'd like soda.
Right.
No, no. And so the whole notion that we are also formed, not just by did I make the right choice, but the very act of choosing itself is formational. So if I choose something that is good for me, but that I don't really want to do, if I'm going to lift 3 times a week, I got to be up at 5 in the morning to do it because otherwise, it's just never going to get done. I do not want to do that. I do not want to get up at 5 in the morning. I'm not happy about this. I'm glad when I've done it.
Oh, it's the best feeling in the world.
Right, it is.
Having done it.
Having done it. Like so many things in life. But it is the act of choosing to do something hard that is forming us. It's not just lifting or working out or doing Orange Theory, right? Like you do,
right.
But 4 or 5 times a week. It's those things themselves are good, but it's the act of choosing that is formational as well. So it's the choices that are put before us by others, and then it's the act of choosing that is formational. And at the same time, it's also true that this formational pattern is never apart from the larger world around us. And we live in a world that we would think if you were to just take a poll of 100 people and say like, well, do you want a world of beauty and goodness? Like, yes, of course we do. If you were to say like, well, this is what the kingdom of God looks like: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and all the rest. Is that the world that you? Well, yes, I want that. Until we discover what it's going to cost us in order for that to be the kingdom, in order for that to be present. And so, like, as has been said before, I would love a world. I want the kingdom of God. I'm not so sure I want the king. I'm not so sure that I want somebody else putting the choices before me. I'm not so sure that I want a world that's forming me in the way that the world would want to. And evil, being how it is, wants to form us into a different way. The world wants to form us in such a way that we are more greedy, more angry, more distracted. We have all kinds of evidence. I mean, just look around, right? Just look at our world. It doesn't take much for us to see that the world is forming us. If left to our own devices, if the world left to its own devices, it ends up forming us into people who go to war, end up people who getting divorced, end up people who end up people who like sexually abuse others, who are all the things. Mm-hmm. And so we recognize pretty quickly that there are these kind of tacit, that's TACIT, if you want to check that out on Google. If you want to Google that word, tacit.
Got it.
Okay, these kind of like implicit, like unspoken rules of how the world is operating. Peter Berger, this famous sociologist, used to talk about these plausibility structures. It's like the unspoken rules of the game of how we're supposed to operate in the world, but that nobody ever explicitly says, but that is trying to shape us in this way. Jesus himself said, look, the world and the way it tries to shape you, because it does it, it's going to hate you because of me. Like, if you think, like most people, again, you take a poll.
Yeah.
What do you think about Jesus? What do you think about Jesus? That is he's such a cool dude. When you think of Jesus, do you think, oh yeah, the world's going to hate him? Like, no. It's him who said, like, the world's going to hate you because of me. Because we're pushing against the way the world is trying to form us. Like in Genesis, you get these two passages in the 12th and 13th chapter. Like, why do the Hebrew writers have to say this? Abraham, he's coming into the land, and it says, and the Canaanites were in the land. It's reminding the reader that, like, Abraham's a different cat. And the Canaanites who are in the land, like that general tribe of people. I mean, these are folks who, on a regular basis, sacrificed their kids to the gods. Like, and that was just some of their better qualities, right? I mean, this is how they were operating. Like, and the writers are reminding us that Abraham is journeying in a land of people who are like. It's like it is a land that is going to try to form Abraham in a certain way. And Abraham's relationship with Yahweh is going to be very different. So it's pressing against a lot. We get to the New Testament where Paul writes and says, don't let the world squeeze you into its mold. Paul talks about principalities and powers. Like, we live in a world that is trying to form us in a particular way. And that formational process, that either it's going to be a biblically formed process. By biblically, like, it's either a process that's being run by the Holy Trinity, by a Father, Son, Spirit relationship that wants to turn us into outposts of beauty and goodness and integrity, all the fruit of the Spirit, all the Sermon on the Mount. We're either moving in that direction or we're moving toward chaos. We're moving toward being whole or perfect, even as our Father in heaven is also whole, or moving away from it. And we are active collaborators in this formational process. But we are not, we can submit ourselves to the process, but we are not ultimately in charge of the process. And then it turns out that we are most durably and deeply formed by the relational interactions that we have. And with the people that we're most commonly engaged. So it's like, who are the people I'm hanging out with? By whom are we most deeply known? And it's possible that some of us might say, oh, I think I'm most deeply known by my iPhone 13. If you were to look at actually like how we spend our time, and to what am I most commonly turning my attention? And so the degree to which we are attuned to the community of people and to those things that we are submitting ourselves to being formed is really important. And so these confessional communities, they are not just a way for us to enter into some kind of group therapy setting where I can get my needs met. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I have a tough marriage, I want to go in and I want to get that stuff solved. No, these are communities whose intention it is to be an outpost of God's Trinitarian formational work on purpose. That's what we really want to attune to. Some of those dynamics that are important when we consider the formational structure of a confessional community is that, first of all, we just assume, but we name this, we assume the presence and activity of the Holy Spirit and the triune God in the room. And that the Spirit has an intention. The Spirit's not like a chair. A chair just happens to be there, but doesn't have any purpose. No, the Spirit has a purpose to form us into the image of Jesus, that we become people who are bearing the fruit of the Spirit that Jesus talks about. I'm the vine, you're the branches, but I've formed you to bear fruit that will last. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, so forth. Pursuant to our last series, that we are to become wisdom walkers. We are people who, when we walk around in the middle of this, that people will turn to us and say, that's a person of wisdom. That person might not even know everything there is to know that could be known. They might not have all the information, but this is a person of wisdom. This is a person who, when I see their life and I read the Sermon on the Mount, they look an awful lot alike. They might not be exactly alike, but they look an awful lot alike. And we also assume that this process of being in a confessional community is a corporate act of ongoing prayer. If we believe that prayer is an act of speaking and listening to God, and if we believe that this is the body of Jesus in which the Spirit dwells, then that conversation is taking place all the time. We've talked about the biblical narrative, the Bible being a structure that's a hard deck for us. We want to weave all the elements of that. We've talked about this in previous sessions, but we want to know that this is not a thing where we just quote a verse. We're not, kind of like just, citing some text and applying it out of the context of the conversation. We want our conversation to be consciously reflective of what we remember and recall from the text, and let that text also mirror on and to map the progression of the community. So it's this formational community that is grounded in a biblical narrative and all that means. And we are going to access and use a lot of what we've learned about interpersonal neurobiology. This whole notion that this is the material world, and it's not a material or spiritual world. This is the material world. It's the mechanics that are not just behind the work, but it's how the world works. And we imagine those mechanics prophetically. We're weaving the mechanics of neuroscience in with the biblical narrative. And we're making those things that are happening in the room that are implicit, the glances, the facial changes. We want to make those explicit. We're going to stop and name those things. And then there are all of the group psychotherapy dynamics that are taking place. And as we progress here in our series, we're going to talk more and more about that. We just know that there are multiple layers of experience. But we want to know that part of why we're in a group and not just individual therapy, not just having a conversation with a pastor, what we're really doing is that we are recognizing that there's greater risk. If I'm going to reveal my vulnerable self in front of 7 or 8 people, that's different than just doing it in front of one person. But the reward is also compounding. And then we see that what we're doing is we're practicing becoming more durably formed into the image of Jesus. You don't have to be a therapist to do this. You don't have to be well-trained in group dynamics to do it. But in the course of these of this work, you will become, kind of more familiar with how group systems work and so forth. We like to say that, everything that we do in a confessional community happens in real life. There's nothing that happens in this room that doesn't happen in the real world. But what we're doing in the room is that we are making everything explicit that happens in your checkout line in Safeway, that happens in your kitchen, that happens in your family, that happens in the boardroom, that happens when you're in your worship community. Everything that's happening in the room of a confessional community happens out there. It's just that here, we're not pretending that it's not happening. We're going to name that it happens. And the more able we are to put language to and to put words to what's happening that we're coming to discover in the language of neuroscience, in the language of the biblical text, we are naming to tame. We name things to tame things. And we are reenacting the second sentence in the Bible. And the world was chaotic and dark, and the Spirit of God hovered over the chaos. He hovered. He was a presence. He was with. He wasn't at war. He wasn't part of the chaos. He was with the chaos. And then what did he do? He didn't become violent. He spoke. And when he spoke, he brought order and purpose. He's forming the world in the first page of the Bible. And this is what we do in the confessional community. We are being formed by speaking in order to bring order and purpose, beauty and goodness, outposts of all those things. This is not the same thing as church, but it's close. Because what we want to say is that these confessional communities are extensions of what the church is about. Without having a homily, without having the Eucharist, without having worship music, it still is our purpose and intentionality for us to be formed into the image of the King, such that these groups themselves become outposts. The body of Jesus, to whom people will look and glorify our Father in heaven. And so it's important as we continue in this series that we be curious about by what and by whom am I being formed? And before we get to our application for the day, we've got an artistic offering, and dude, take it away.
Yeah. So when you told me that we were going to be talking about formation today, I started thinking about one of my favorite bands, which is U2. I remember I read a book of interviews with Bono, the lead singer of U2, where he was posed the question of who is the greatest pop songwriter, and in his opinion at the time it was Prince, but he said the problem is Prince didn't have a band. So therefore he would put out 34 songs and 3 of them would be genius, and a lot of them might not be that good because he didn't have the band that was pushing back on him, trying to make him better, trying to, being able to say, good job, or let's work on this some more, and really form him. And so when I was in college, U2 was coming into the scene, and I was a DJ in college, and I had a show that was like, they would call it alternative music, and at the time U2 was like alternative music. I mean, it was not mainstream really at all, and they blew up, right? Obviously, and by the late '80s, they were superstars. But you can imagine the pressure of people of that fame and young guys from Dublin, Ireland, that it was not all great. It was difficult, and they were beginning to struggle as a band. These guys that had been forming each other for years, since their really their childhood, and they were about ready to break up, and they decided to go to Dublin or to Berlin to give it another shot and go to the studio and try to see if they could make it happen. But musically, they were wanting to go in different directions, and it just wasn't really working until the guitar player, the Edge, started working with these chords he was playing. He just kept playing them over and over again, and it kind of struck the guys musically and these chord progressions, and they latched onto it, and then some lyrics started coming, and eventually the song titled "One"
Holy cow.
was created.
Gives me
and
it gives me goosebumps just listening to this.
It's an unbelievable song. I love this song, and the fact that they made this song and created this song, which was at the time a lot about breaking up as a band, but then deciding at the end to reconcile and continue on. This song really saved the band and allowed them to collectively continue to go out into the world and create beauty. And so the song, the song starts with questions. Is it getting better, or do you feel the same? Will it make it easier on you now? You got someone to blame. You say one love, one life when it's one need in the night. One love, we get to share it, leaves you, baby, if you don't care for it. And then he asks the question, did I disappoint you? Leave a bad taste in your mouth? You act like you never had love. You want me to go without. And then he says, well, it's too late to drag the past out into the light. We're one, but we're not the same. And I love this line. We get to carry each other. Carry each other. And then he asks the questions that I think are beautiful questions. Have you come here for forgiveness? Have you come to raise the dead? Have you come here to play Jesus to the lepers in your head?
Dude.
I mean, right? And goes on, did I ask too much? And goes these questions go on, and then the reconciliation starts to happen, and he says, we got one love, one blood, one life. You got to do what you should. One life with each other, sister, brothers. One life, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other. Carry each other. And, I just love this song, and I love how it helped them continue with their formation with one another. And it's become an anthem for it's become a lot more than what the song was written. How I think that a song can be written to mean just one thing to one person, but it can become a song that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Bono said that he likes to think that the frame of this song is strong enough to hang a lot more stories on it, other than the ones that he was not finishing. And he said he feels like this is, in this particular song, it's an unfinished song that the listener then gets to finish, which I thought was a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I encourage people to go listen to that song. We'll have it linked to the show notes, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.
Well, I love that this just when we were talking about this earlier in the week, when you reflected, I think this would be something to share for us.
Right.
I nearly came out of my shoes when you started talking about this. It's just so great, and I love this idea that we get to carry each other.
Right.
Not I have to. Right. But I get, and I feel that with you and me. I know that you, yep. And with Amy, it's such a privilege to do life. I mean, even from a distance. I mean, as much as we're able to do life together, and that I feel that I feel being carried by you and by Amy, and just this morning we're having a conversation about something that I'm that's banging around in my head and creating distress for me before we started this recording, and I'm in a different place now because you guys are in my life. Yeah. And it's just a beautiful thing. I'm being formed by you. I'm been formed by this this enterprise, this podcast experience. Just we sense the Spirit's presence in doing the work, within us and between us and through us. So application.
Yeah. Yeah. So the application for this week, we want to consider reflecting on what those things are that have formed you and that are forming you. Consider particular relationships, particular habits that you practice, and particular messages that you receive, often non-consciously, from the world. Consider how challenging you believe it will be to make a shift in your participation in the system that will most durably form you. Consider the ways you long to be formed differently than some of the ways you are currently being formed. So then write them down, keep them handy to compare later to what you discover over the course of being part of a confessional community. And as you start to experience being formed in a confessional community.
Yeah.
And this is great, Curt. I can't wait to learn more about the confessional community, and I'm grateful that that you're in my life and that we are in the process of forming one another.
Yeah, right on. Thanks be to God.
All right, if you're watching
Hi,
on
bro.
YouTube, stick around because Amy's going to be joining us here in just a couple of seconds. Love you, Curt.
Love you, man. Amy Cella,
Hey guys,
Hi, Amy.
live action.
live action.
Chilla,
oh my
chilla.
gosh. Chilla. Okay, I have a lot. I could talk for 20 minutes on, but
I'm sure you could talk for more than that.
Starting with, pinching your nose and dangling. I mean, I have an older sister and I have some stories, but that doesn't include
my
a glove
gosh.
hovering over my head.
Oh man,
That's
like
hardcore.
that's like worthy of a movie.
Yeah, of a scary movie.
Yeah.
And then I looked up nascent, and the definition
Oh my gosh.
First, I had to figure out how to spell it, but apparently Google knows how to spell it. This was the first definition I got. Freshly generated in a reactive form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Freshly generated.
That's helpful.
It's a freshly
That's super
generated
helpful.
couple.
Word for the
Right.
day. Yes, and then I did come across coming or having recently come into existence. I think
Yeah.
that's the one. Boom.
Yeah. But imagine how much simpler that can all be when you just
Just
say
saying-
nascent.
Yes, it was super simple for Pep and I.
Yeah.
It was so simple. Okay,
Simple for you, just not for the rest of us who have to go look it up.
Had a homework.
That sounds simpler.
That didn't narrow. That didn't. Okay, this idea, we're constantly being formed. This is what's like swimming in my head. We're constantly being formed. Then how are we being formed?
Mm-hmm.
The U2 song. And then like Bono saying, how did he say it? I hope that there is room for more stories, or how did he say it, Pep?
Yeah. He said that, I don't know what he said.
It was that, something like that. More stories.
But I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
I know I think he said something like, "This is a nascent song."
This
No,
is
he
amazing.
said, I like to think that the frame of this song is strong enough to hang a lot more stories on than the ones that I was not finishing.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so then
Yeah.
this is where Pep and I trust that Curt will put the puzzle together in this. But I thought, okay, when we look at a piece of art, when we listen to a song, when we're in a group dynamic, and I thought of, I read the story again about Ian and Gabe when in Soul of Desire, when Ian becomes so angry when Gabe, not at Gabe, but for Gabe. And I'm like, we find ourselves in these songs and in this piece of art and in Gabe. It's like, and then we know that shows us how we were formed, how
Right.
we've been formed.
Right.
And it's like, okay, two things, and then I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Like my therapist, sometimes I'll ask her a question and she'll say, I'll answer that, but I want to know what you think the answer is. Because and like Mary Chapin Carpenter, love her music, and
Northern Virginia native.
Yes, Wolf Trap. Is that the?
Yep.
I heard her say on a podcast, people want to know why I wrote the song, what it means to me. And she said, I don't want to tell them because I want them to know what it means for them.
Yeah.
To Bono's point. Like what is your story in it?
Right. Well, and I think that when these things happen, there's a song, we want to ask Bono the question. Even the energy behind my curiosity to ask Bono the question, or to ask Mary Chapin Carpenter, it is about my own stuff coming into the room.
Right.
I have a longing, not just to know what Bono thinks. I have a longing to name something that I'm feeling that this song is evoking in me.
Right.
And maybe if Bono answers the question, maybe that'll give me a hint about what's going on for me, but that's really what's going on. Like, I'm really wanting to know what's emerging for me here. Pep, what's going on?
I just
saw a smile on your face. I thought you had something to say.
No. Yeah, I just smile at the I love this. I love the music that they've put out over the years, and you know, the one day. So I don't know if I ever told you that, guys. This one day I was sitting in church in Hollywood Presbyterian Church, and this Nell and I were sitting there, and this family we were on the edge, and they wanted to sit beyond us, and so. All these kids, bunch of kids coming through, and I'm like, you know, kind of young guy with long hair. It was Bono sitting right next to us at church with his family.
My gosh.
We had a pastor at the time who was from Dublin, and whenever Bono was in town, he would come to church, and the word the pastor kind of put out, guys come here for church. Nobody, just be a human, you know, and so. Just
Bono.
said hello, and this is Bono sitting in the church pew with me.
Well,
it's awesome.
It's like, we find ourselves in everything, and I thought, well, that's kind of like self-absorbed, but it tells us who we are, and if we know who we are, then we can know, then we're more equipped to be present with others.
Right, and this is an example, perhaps, of what we might do in a confessional community time, like what I'm going to say right now, which is like, so Amy, you just said at first glance it seems so self-absorbed.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's kind of, it would be easy. Oh yeah, that seems so self-absorbed because all you want to talk about is you, and then you say, oh, wait a minute. The Shema, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. The Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, which are really important words that are part of this. Mm-hmm. You are to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength, right? This is the first commandment, the first of the 10. And we jump to those 10 commandments. Oh, here are the commandments. Love the Lord your God and all. Don't have idols, all the things. Mm-hmm. And what we imagine is that we are given a group of 10 commandments, and then when Jesus comes along and says, well, what are the two greatest? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Like, yep. And the first thing I imagine is, I have to love God and then love other people as I love myself. And if you ask people, what's the order? What's the order in which these things are done? Oh, well, the first, you have to love God first. And then you love your neighbor. Right. Wait, love your neighbor. Well, yeah, as yourself. Like, yeah, what's the order? And we forget the first part of the Shema. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. He's not reminding people of who he is, as if somehow like he's insecure enough that he has to remind people.
Right.
He is telling them, I want you to know that what we begin with is that I love you. Your being brought out of the land of Egypt is like, I'm crazy about you. You bunch of knuckleheads. I'm crazy about you. Like, the beginning is not that I love God. and then I love my neighbor. The beginning is I have to be loved. I have to receive. I have to start with God loving me. I can't love Him in return. I can't give my neighbor what I don't. Love my neighbor as I love myself. That's the start. And so, as it turns out, I actually have to pay attention to me before I pay attention to anybody else. And we easily translate this and say, like, oh, no, that's all self-centered. Like, no, this is like the way the material world works is that if a newborn is going to grow up into an infant and a toddler and an adult who loves, the newborn has to have the experience of being lavishly loved. Even when they are dangling horrible, nightmarish hands above their face or pinching their nose. Maybe they thought that was a way to love us. Right? I'm going to scare you. I'm going to terrify you into loving me.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the point being is like, oh, no, wait. We come to these confessional communities and we think like, oh, yeah, I'm going to learn like what's the right thing to do. Like, look, the first thing that we're there to do is to be loved.
Right.
We are not very good at that. Because I've spent all my life making sure that I don't put me first.
Right.
Or all the things. So I'm actually not, I don't have the experience of being loved. And so you can teach me all you want to teach me. You can teach me all about the mechanics of interpersonal biology.
Yeah.
And if I'm not having the experience in the room of being loved, which of course requires somebody to ask me questions about me. And where are the parts of me that, and yes, I'm going to have to focus on me. That's exactly right. For the purpose of being loved. And then out of this space to love others.
Well, and it's so amazing because then, like I said, it does feel selfish and self-absorbed. And we could have moved on. Like, well, but then, like you said, which we're doing right now, like we're talking about, that's actually what does need to be done.
Yeah, it's what needs to be said in the room. Okay, so, and I'm going to jump back to the U2 story, Pep.
Yeah.
It's a curious thing, and maybe he talks about this, but I'm wondering, why Berlin?
Oh, okay. So Berlin, first of all, Berlin in the late 80s was a pretty happy place, right? The walls come down. There's a lot going on there, but it's also happens to be where David Bowie went and kind of saved his career. He went and he got cleaned up while he was there from drugs that he was doing, and I think he did the Heroes album in Berlin, and they recorded at the same studio that Bowie recorded Heroes in Berlin. So that's, So I just want to point out, they are imagining that there's something about the place where they're going to go that is already ahead of them. Like, they're not going, they could have recorded in Dublin, I'm sure. Sure, they've got recording studios in Dublin, in London, New York. There's something about the place. There's something that they're anticipating. They're already assuming that they are being formed even by the place that they're going. Interesting.
When we talk about confessional communities, there is something about the structure. You go into an Eastern Orthodox church, dude. You walk in the door and you're being formed.
I went to an Eastern Orthodox church in Bulgaria in their Easter, where you walk around. Everybody's walking around the church, and then you go in the church and you crawl under the altar. Symbolically leaving your sin and your and everything, and you come out in this rebirth on the other side of the altar, the church alone is impressive and evokes feeling and things, and when that's going on in addition to it, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And so in many respects, the confessional communities, the very nature of how they're structured, and which we'll be getting into more of, how they operate and so forth, their intention is that there's nothing that we're doing in that space that is not intended to form us into the image of Jesus. Everything about it is intentional. Is intended to move us in a certain direction. And so the structure itself plays as much a role as like what actually happens in the structure. Like there was something about Berlin that was already calling them, that was going to create a structure for them that was already evoking some sense of hope. There's something about that place. They're not just flipping a coin. Oh, I guess we'll go to Berlin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
It's
Amy,
cool.
did you have other stuff? Yeah. I know you said you had a couple things, but I don't know if there's more.
No, I think we talked about them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good. Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge for our listeners that I love it's J.B. Phillips is the translation of the Romans 12:1 and 2 that we talked about, that quoted earlier, where it says, "Don't let," where Paul says, the NIV, like, "Beseech ye therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercy of God, offer your bodies a living sacrifice, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed," right? And J.B. Phillips says, "Do not let the world squeeze you into its mold." And I'm just aware of all the ways that the world is intending to do that, trying to do that.
Well, we're going to be formed one way or another. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be formed. So if you're not intentional about it, you're going to be. Who knows in what shape you're going to come out the other side?
Yeah.
But you're going to be formed, and
Yeah.
you're not. You can't form yourself.
Mm-mm.
You can't. You can't form in a vacuum. So as you if you're not intentional. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I think getting ready for this episode, I think more than ever before, it's really kind of been impressed upon me, the reality that, I know, like, there are all the things that I think that I need to do, right? I want to be in terms of like reading and prayer and and body health and all the things and it's like, oh no, I'm responsible. I'm the one who's forming me. God happens to be around for that. So that's good. Check that box. But I live as if I am the primary formational force in my life, and I am not. I mean, it's either Jesus or it's something else. And it doesn't matter what the something else is, like, it ain't going to be good. And so, like, I've just been really kind of convicted about, like, I have to be aware of submitting myself to the Trinity, continually turning my attention back to that throughout the day. It's not just like, oh, I'll do that. Now I made that decision. Like, no, it's like continual, because the world's coming for me. Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, you can be formed by your iPhone.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for this great morning.
Nice, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Until
always
next
good.
time.
Great to be together.
Always.
All right, love you guys.
Until next time. All right, love you.
Good to see some of you.
This podcast is produced by Curt Thompson, Pepper Sweeney, and myself, Amy Chella. Audio production and editing is by Keaton Simons. Video production and editing is done by Mark Gould. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on social media at BeingKnownPod. If you like this podcast, tell a friend. If you love this podcast, tell everyone you know. And please like, rate, and review wherever you listen. Be well, be now.